We have all the latest updates concerning your NHL trade and free agent rumors. We're looking at the latest speculation on players like Henrik Lundqvist, as well as Taylor Hall and Jacob Markstrom in free agency. Plus, we have the latest trade rumors on teams like the Tampa Bay Lightning, the Vegas Golden Knights, and the Edmonton Oilers. We'll discuss all that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have quite a bit to cover today. We have all the latest updates here. Let's get started with King Henrik Lundqvist and what's likely going to take place for the next move in his NHL career now that he's a free agent after being bought out by the New York Rangers. I've seen reports from several NHL reporters and outlets indicating that it's pretty much a foregone conclusion that he is going to be signing a one-year contract with the Washington Capitals on Friday. Of course, they can't make anything official until then, but obviously he's having talks behind the scenes now that he's a UFA, and it seems like Washington is where he's going to go. Clearly, it seemed to be a preference from him to remain on the East Coast. Likely doesn't have to disrupt family life too much on a one-year deal. Obviously, playing in the Metropolitan Division, a lot of those teams he's quite familiar with and would visit those cities quite often. So going to Washington is not too bad from where he is now, but obviously be very different for him after being a long time New York Ranger. But it makes sense that Holtby is going to be departing the Caps via free agency. Samsonov will become the starter, and then Lundqvist will be the backup. Be interesting to see what they decide to do with Phoenix Copley. He could remain with the Caps organization and could end up being demoted to the American Hockey League, or they could try to move him along because he does have a fairly cheap contract, but still he is signed for a couple more years. So not quite sure exactly how they plan to go about that, but for right now, he could be a player who even gets exposed to Seattle once we hit the expansion draft, because at this point, if Lundqvist only does a one-year deal, he won't be an active member on the roster when the expansion draft takes place. So we'll see how things go, but that's the likely landing spot here for King Henrik. Now, we saw a few moves today from the Nashville Predators freeing up a fair bit of cap space, and the speculation is that they're doing so to make a run at free agent forward Taylor Hall, and I would think that the Predators would have an excellent chance at landing him. Now, clearly, they bought out Kyle Turris today, which is a very expensive long-term commitment. There's 4 years left on that deal, so they're going to be tied to that contract for another 8 seasons. They save $4 million a year for 4 years, but then they're going to have $2 million of dead cap space on top of that for an extra 4. So they're going to be paying him a lot of money for a really long time. Turris likely gets a new contract, some results for a much lower amount. And hopefully he can rebound and get his career back on track. But besides doing that, they also traded Nick Bonino. So they're down a couple of center icemen here. But obviously they have Matt Duchene, they have Ryan Johansson still. So they're still in decent shape in that regard. But, they had a lot of players in their forward group that could play center. And this is mainly done for cap-saving purposes. They also picked up Luke Kunin coming back from Minnesota in the trade for Bonino. And he can play center too. So he's a cheaper option at that position for right now. So they can go with Johansson, Duchene, and Kunin likely 1, 2, 3 down the middle. They also have Colton Sissons too. He has a possibility to play center. So obviously, they still have the depth that they need at the center position. They're just able to do so in a little bit cheaper manner. Obviously, with the money they saved between the Turris buyout and the Bonino trade, they feel that they're going to take that money and go after Taylor Hall. Now, of course, they have John Hines as their head coach. Obviously, Hall had a fair bit of success with John Hines, and I know he's made comments before saying how much he respected him as a coach, one of his best coaches he's ever had. So there is that connection there that would not be surprising. That would be worthwhile bringing in Taylor Hall. And Nashville is one of the places as well who has a pretty good advantage when it comes to income tax. So clearly there's a lot of good reasons why he would go to Nashville. Now, Nashville's a team as well who are, I wouldn't know if you'd really still call them a serious cup contender, but with a few moves, they could certainly get back to that. They're certainly a team who will be a playoff team at the very least, or should be, if everything goes to plan. So I can understand why he would work well for Hall. Speculation is he's probably going to be looking at a 2-year deal. I mean, it could end up being something different, but a 2-year deal somewhere between $7 and $8 million. That would be likely what takes place. So we'll see if Hall ends up going to Nashville. I mean, he could end up playing on a line with a guy like Matt Duchene. Theoretically, should be a pretty good offensive line, but for some reason both players just haven't had that real ability to take their teams up a notch. So not really convinced it's going to take the Nashville Predators and make them into a serious contender. Will they be better offensively? They should be, but we also said that when they brought in other guys like Kyle Turris and Matt Duchene and all that, and at that point, they really weren't as good offensively as they should have been. So we'll see what happens. But also John Hines hasn't been the coach there for too long yet, so we'll see what happens. But Hall going to Nashville is a real possibility at this point. Now, when it comes to the Vancouver Canucks, it sounds like a couple of their top priorities to get signed, and goaltender Jacob Markstrom and forward Tyler Toffoli are both heading to market here on Friday. Something could change, and it could change in a hurry. You just never know. As they say, all it takes is one phone call, and things can change in a hurry. But at this point, it looks like they'll both be heading to market here to test free agency, as no deals are done as of yet. And a big part of that is the Canucks being so tied up and wrapped up in an Oliver Ekman-Larsson trade. They really need to see how that goes and know what the end result's going to be before they can really analyze their cap situation. So I'm not sure when that's going to come to be, but it has been reported that Ekman-Larsson and his agent want a deadline of the opening of free agency on Friday as a deadline to get a deal done. If it's not done by then, it sounds like he wants to kind of pull the plug on it and just stay in Arizona. At least that's what we're led to believe. So we will see where things go in that regard. But when it comes to Jacob Markstrom, it's been reported that assuming he hits free agency, that one of the teams that will be hot on pursuit after him would be another Canadian team, the Edmonton Oilers. Now, we already know the Oilers were rumored to be in the goaltending carousel looking for an upgrade. Mike Smith likely does not return, so it makes sense that obviously that would be a player that they target, but it might prove to be difficult because the rumors is that he's still looking for a $6 million contract, which I think is a little bit much considering what Robert Leonard just signed for $5 million. So, and it does impact the market, but at the same time, the Leonard contract in Vegas, obviously with the difference in the taxes, you can take a little bit less money there and still take home this, about the same amount of money he's playing in a different market. So the $5 million contract in Vegas is probably somewhat comparable to a $6 million deal elsewhere, but I guess it depends if you see Markstrom as being an equal to him or not. Of course, you got to factor in his age. What do the Canucks really want to do? I know they want to bring him back, but they also only want to bring him back for what they feel is a fair price tag. So difficult to say what happens in that regard, but I think he'll have other suitors lining up too, but expect the Oilers to be wanting to talk to Markstrom pretty quick here if he does indeed hit free agency. Like I said, when it comes to Toffoli, there's a real possibility he could return back to California, but again, we'll have to wait on that as well. We also found out earlier that the Canucks did not qualify Troy Stetcher, so he'll be a UFA. He likely doesn't return. And, of course, you also have Zach McEwen got signed. That's a short-term deal. Virtanen did get a qualifying offer. Doesn't mean he stays, but at least he's in the mix right now. We'll get a contract at some point, whether it be from the Canucks or somebody else if he is moved. Now, staying with the Oilers here, apparently they are reported to be interested in Tyler Johnson from the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now, I don't know if the Oilers are one of the teams that he's provided to the Lightning to be able to work out a deal with without that he would consider waiving his no trade clause to. It's been rumored and reported that he's given about 5 or 6 teams for them to work with. So obviously, to a degree, it kind of makes sense for the Oilers, but a lot of that is going to depend if they do get another goaltender or how things work out with the roster, because getting Johnson without having money go out would prove to be quite challenging, considering the other things that they need to do. And if they spend more money on goaltending, that's just going to prove to be that much more difficult. But there is a possibility there of some interest, at least, between the Oilers and the Johnson camp, and we'll see how the Tampa Bay Lightning decide to proceed. It was being reported as well that the asking price for Johnson is probably going to be a mid-round pick is likely all it could take. And of course, we know as well that the Oilers did not qualify Athanasiou or Matt Benning. They will also become unrestricted free agents, which, in the case of Athanasiou, is unfortunate given what they gave up for him at the NHL trade deadline. Now, as we know as well, the Vegas Golden Knights need to clear some space as well. Marc-Andre Fleury is priority number 1 to get his salary off the books. They're still working on getting a third team involved to retain some salary to move the player. It is believed that the Carolina Hurricanes are interested. There was speculation that the asking price now is for multiple draft picks. Obviously, a second-round pick is what was originally being offered. That's not going to cut it. It's going to have to be something a little bit more valuable than just a second-round pick if they're going to take on $2 or $3 million. They very well could ask for a prospect or, maybe even a first-round pick next year or something to that effect. But Vegas is going to have to pay up dearly to really entice the team to want to help them move that contract. And they apparently were also engaged in trade conversations regarding defenseman Nate Schmidt as well. So obviously, they're rumored to be in on Pietrangelo if he indeed hits free agency. So again, if that happens, they're going to have to find other contracts to go. And on the blue line, Schmidt would be one of the ones they would look to make that happen. There's also been talk as well about them maybe moving a guy like Paul Stastny, who makes over $6 million, only has 1 year left as well. They could consider going down a buyout route. They still have a little bit of time in that regard, but I think they probably don't really want to do that. They need to move the full contract off the books if they can to get the full value. So that's not going to be an easy task. So we'll see what happens in that regard. But Vegas is actively working here between Fleury, Schmidt, and Snasny. They very well could be your top players who likely are going to be moved for this team in order to free up the space to make the other moves they're looking to do. So that is all your updates for today, so make sure you stay tuned to the channel. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news. We're in a very busy news cycle here, so stay tuned. Lots more coming at you here in the coming days. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.